Tim Petrowich here for Dateline Marion, and it's that time of the year again.
Yep.
It's been a while, but we're visiting with Marion head football coach Kerry Martin as we get ready to head into the 2016 high school football season. We talked a couple weeks ago at camp. We talked again last week at the scrimmage, and it's still, this time of the year is still really exciting, especially for football fans and for coaches and players.
It is. The start of the season is always an exciting time, and the anticipation of, what kind of team do we have, and how good is our competition, and how will our kids perform, and what kids will surprise us and stand out, and it's just an exciting time. It has been for many years for me now, and I'm excited to get started.
We talked a little bit about the fact that when people watch this 2016 edition of the Wildcats, you're going to see a lot of names that you've seen before. It starts with Jake Schmidt at quarterback, and he's wasn't the starter last year, but he got some significant playing time.
Yeah.
Then you could go through names like Jaden Lacey, Caden Hilliard, Hughes. You've got Adolph Paulton. You've got so many players that are coming back from last year's team. Hunter Milligan on the defensive side. Terrell Henderson. Yeah, there's a lot of familiar names. How important is that when you're trying to, I guess now that you've established yourself as more reloading than rebuilding from year to year?
Yeah, well, it makes a big difference, I think, in just for the younger players to come in and see the way things are done, not be told the way they're done by coaches, but to see how they're done by veteran players who've been through the system before and have understand the expectations of the coaches, and for those guys to establish a certain work ethic and a certain way we do things, the way we conduct ourselves at a team meal, the way we travel on a bus, the way we take care of our locker room and pick up our trash. I mean, those little things are a big deal. And I think for them to see those older kids on how to practice and bringing some energy to the practice or to the weight room, and it's an invaluable asset to have.
I think another thing too is when some of those kids step up and assert some leadership skills on the team and try to, and do their own, in their own way, take charge of a certain group of players, a certain position, or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. And they're leaders not only overall, but you're right, they're leaders within their position group and on their side of the ball. And I think that really makes a big difference. We've been anticipating this being a good leadership senior class for quite some time, and I think you could see that when they were younger, that they would possibly be good leaders when they got older, and they've certainly done that for us throughout the summer and throughout the beginning of camp.
I guess I have to ask the question, what from these kids that are coming back, what stands out the most to you about what you think this team is capable of this year?
Well, I think, as a coach, you can help improve the speed and strength of your kids, but sometimes there are certain things about your players and about each team that comes along that you don't have a lot of control over. One of the things that you love to see early on is attitude and effort. I mean, it really starts with that, and that's something that I think we tell the kids over and over again. We have control over this. We may not have control over how many playmakers we have and all the skill players or great linemen that we're blessed to have size-wise, but one of the things we have control over is attitude and effort. We as a staff, you as players, can control the attitude we have and the effort we give every day. And I think if you have those two things, you can build a foundation on, you're in good shape. And I think we have those two elements, and we've had them at least all summer and through the start of football practice. So we're excited about that. This team brings that. This group has brought that and given us a chance to be successful. Because if you don't have those two things, you don't have any chance to be successful unless you can just out-talent people. But even then, if attitude and effort are not great, that's only going to last so long. So they've given us a chance to succeed based on their attitude and effort. I think that's what this group has brought to us. Then you take their work ethic, the sacrifices they've made in practice time and coming to camp for 2 weeks. I think we've laid a foundation to be a very competitive football team.
And you mentioned that too, the camp. It's changed a little bit. In previous years, you've only had 1 week of camp, and this year you had two, and you may have had 2 weeks last year, I don't remember, but going to a different way you approach the summer and the off-season workouts.
We're constantly reevaluating the way we do things to try to be better. And it isn't about working longer, it's about working smarter. We actually used fewer contact days this year by a couple of days than in previous years, even though we went 2 weeks of camp for 4 nights each. We went to, last year we had a five-day camp. This year we had an 8-day camp. But we went over 2 weeks and we went 2 4-day weeks. But I felt like camp was so valuable to our progress the last several years. Why not break that into 2 weeks of camp and try to maximize that? And we cut out some of the other days earlier in the year. We went fewer days in June. So we didn't really work more days, but I think we worked more effectively to get this team ready. Our first opponent is a team out of Tennessee that practiced way before we started. And then they had 2 scrimmages before they played their first game, which is against us. So we're a little bit behind in the fact that they kind of have a practice advantage that we have to try to make up the difference on by doing some things like an extra week of camp, some extra things in scrimmages and practice. So we're hoping we've closed that gap a little bit.
Before we talk about that first opponent, I want to talk about some of the players. Who stood out to you so far in the preseason?
I think it starts with Tucker Sullivan, offensive lineman who's a 3-year starter, Hunter Milligan, defensive back, wide receiver, 3-year starter. To me, those 2 guys have been in the program and starting for us for quite some time. And then you mentioned some of the other guys that have come along. I think Jaden Lacey and Caden Hilliard, who played some last year, ought to be good players for us this year. I think Josh Messamore was a starter last year. I think he should be a significant contributor on our offensive line. Malcolm Berry, Adolph Paulson, Kyle Hughes, those are guys that were starters last year. So, when you look at our team, there's a good mix of some veteran players, some guys that I think are going to be first-year starters that I think can have an impact. Terrell Henderson returns after starting as a sophomore on the defensive line last year. We've got some big shoes to fill, but I think we've got some guys willing to step in and as you said, try to reload this program and not rebuild it. And I see Ben McLaughlin started last year as a sophomore. He's back again for 2 more years, hopefully. And Blake Horner will be a first-year starter for us at tight end. I look for good things out of Blake. Jack Bunting, who played his sophomore year, did not play last year, is back again. And he could see time as a linebacker and running back for us. And then one of my favorite things about coaching is just having these surprise guys that maybe you didn't expect that stepped up. We had a move-in named DJ Trimble. We have a young man named Alec Jimenez who's never been a starter but has a chance to contribute.
And Alec played some last year at the end of the season too.
And guys like that could step up and play a significant role for us that maybe weren't on the depth chart a lot last year, had to play some JV ball, but they paid their dues. And I'm really excited to see what they can do. Clayton Bastion's another one. So, there's a lot of names. I know I probably left some out. I'll tell you a big surprise for us has been Brennan Pecord. Brennan Pecord, Jonathan Clarida, Quentin Patterson, some of these young linemen that we weren't exactly sure how good they could be have shown great promise for us.
Your team traditionally has been, and not in the bad way, but an offensive team. I mean, you've scored a lot of points, and there's a lot of offensive firepower and a lot of quickness on that team.
I think so. We've been blessed to have some really good offenses, and last year's team set some records and ranked in the top 5 in many categories since I've been here, the 15 years I've been here. So we hope to be able to continue that and to keep putting points on the board. And it's been funny because some years we start off kind of slow, we end up scoring as many points as the previous year, and some years we get off to a fast start. And I don't know what this team will do offensively, but I think they've shown potential. I think they showed in the scrimmage in front of the public last week that they've got some explosiveness to them and some firepower. And we've made some changes on defense that I think will help this football team. Coach Dunning and the defensive staff have worked hard to make some adjustments to the talented group we've got, and so we're excited to see that. I think our kicking game is going to be strong. David Fletcher, Tyson Steckland, and Levi Hamlin are all, I think, legitimate, strong kickers, and I think we could put some really good numbers up there, special teams wise.
One of the things I look back on from last year is that you finished 6-4, But if you go back and look at 3 of those losses in particular, the All-Tough game you led in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Centralia you led and had a chance, led throughout most of the game, had a chance to win at the end. The other regular season game you lost was Champaign Central, which was one that probably was out of hand. But then you go back to the playoff game and you're looking to have the ball, had a chance to tie the game late or take the lead with a conversion in that playoff game, and then still had a chance after they got the ball back. And except for a 4th down conversion, they got to run the clock out. So 3 of those 4 games, you're right there. And with all these kids that you've got coming back and that kind of experience in close games, that's got to be a benefit too.
Well, you know, they played in big ball games. They played in crucial ball games. They played in tough conference championship games. They played in very tight playoff game last year against Centralia. I mean, they're tested. They certainly have played a good schedule last year. We're playing what I think is maybe even a tougher schedule this year. So they ought to be battle tested. I don't think we're going to be surprised by the quality of the opponent we play. I just think this is the time of year I think that's most anxious for coaches, because you've done your preparation, but you never know if your team's ready until you take the field and play that first game. And I think our staff has worked as hard as they've ever worked to get a team ready to play, and I think we're just all kind of anxious to get them out there on the field against a very good Haywood team and see what we can do.
Let's get into the schedule, and you start off by going to Tennessee. It's a 3+ hour road trip. Haywood County, the Tomcats they're called, and my understanding is that their style of football is a lot like a Tomcat.
Yeah. They're explosive. I mean, from all indications we've got from people and watching some film on them, they're explosive. They've got some very talented players. They are very aggressive. They play a very tough brand of football in Western Tennessee.
And they were a playoff team last year too.
Yeah, and they're quality. I mean, they're very well coached. One of the first things we noticed about them was just how well coached they are, and technique-wise, and the way they, look for things when the ball goes away, staying home backside, and they're wrong-arming a down block after a down block. Just things that kids don't do unless they're coached to do them. So they're very well coached. They're very talented. They return some key linemen, especially on the offensive side. So it'll take a good performance by us.
Changing the week 2 schedule, you've got Dunlap coming to town, and this is an interesting part of your schedule. After your week 1 road trip to Tennessee, you have Dunlap, Galesburg, Cahokia, and Mount Vernon all at home. 4 games in a row at home.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Until the second half of the season.
Until the last half of the season, we have 1 home game, which is homecoming out of the last 4. But none of those trips are, crazy distance trips. Even though we look at Mattoon now as a 3-hour trip and say that's not too bad, right?
Right.
So it's like I said, it's a tough schedule we have, but it's part of being a 5A football team, and we've had to reach further and further outside of our own area to find ball games. And I actually was telling the parents group the other day, I think the schedule actually gets a little better when we start bringing in Mascoutah, Highland, and Jerseyville over the next few years to replace the Dunlaps, Galesburg, and Haywood County. So I think there is some hope, there's some light that there's some closer games coming. But we don't complain about the schedule. You have to play it. I mean, most of the teams we play are 5A football teams, are close to our enrollment. And if we're playing better quality opponents, we hope that'll make us better and prepare us more for our conference and prepare us more for the playoffs. And you got to line up and play football, and that's what we intend to do. And our kids have never complained about the distance, the travel, the schedule, the opponents. They just line up and play, and they play well. So I hope we can continue that.
Talk about the South 7. A lot of changes this year. 3 new head coaches in the conference: Cahokia, Mount Vernon, Centralia. Of course, Althoff with a run to the state championship game in Class 4A last year. A lot of players back. They're clearly one of the favorites. How does do you think your team stacks up with the South 7 Conference?
Great question. It creates a lot of unknowns with a new Cahokia coach and a new Mount Vernon coach, as you said, and the new Centralia coach, who was a staff member for Ray Calling. So I don't think there'll be a lot of changes there. I think he'll do a really good job. Carbondale's in their 2nd year under Coach Lee, and I think he's a great football coach, so I'm sure they'll be better. And Althoff has what someone said 5 or 6 Division I players, and so they're going through that great talent pool right now, and they've got some quality kids back. And it's the South 7. I think it's when I first came here 15 years ago, there was really it was a 2-team race and everyone else was kind of scrambling at the bottom. And over the course of that 15 years, there's been greater parity and greater balance, I think, among the conference. We've seen a lot of different teams assert themselves throughout the years. And I think it'll be a competitive conference again. I think there's a lot of great coaching that takes place in our conference right now. And I look for some very good ball games.
I guess the last thing about the schedule, something that's different this year, is now 2 Saturday afternoon games instead of 1, and instead of none a couple years ago.
Yeah, we've been playing the last game on Saturday, which we no longer play that game. We play Mattoon on a Friday night, but we have 2 early games on a Saturday, which creates an interesting dynamic. I mean, it's playing opening game on a Saturday afternoon in Tennessee, 3 hours away, is different. And then having Galesburg at home on a Saturday afternoon will be a unique early season thing. We played Harrisburg here a few years ago after a storm. So it's not something we haven't done. It's just something kind of unique. And maybe it'll get some fans out that haven't seen us play on a Friday night. Maybe some area fans who've been accustomed to watching their team on Friday will come and watch us on a Saturday. So, and we're hoping for a decent traveling group with us on this Saturday to Tennessee and to watch us take on the Tomcats.
And I think that's a 2 o'clock kickoff.
It's a 2 o'clock kickoff. There's been some schedules that showed 3 o'clock, but it is a 2 o'clock kickoff.
All right. Well, that's Kerry Martin. He's the head coach of the Marion Wildcats. 2016 football season starts this Saturday in Haywood County, Tennessee. For Dateline Marion, I'm Tim Petrowich.